Chapter 19. As soon as Max left, Batman went to his computer and opened an encrypted log that he had been compiling the past 2 days. Encrypted log. Subject analysis. Project. Contingency protocols, Omega safeguards. Compiled by BW. Clearance. Alpha. 1. Superman Clark Kent. Strengths. Super strength. Supersonic, hypersonic speeds. Near invulnerability. Heat vision. Flight. Enhanced senses. Tactical combat skills. Confirmed weaknesses. Red sun radiation, suspected. Magic, hypothetical, requires testing. Mind control susceptibility confirmed during parademon corruption. Possible countermeasures. Nerve gas. Vulnerable to telepathic attacks. 2. Tobi Pietro Maximoff, now known as Max Schiller. Strengths. Superhuman speed comparable to Flash during transformed state. Super strength estimated above Wonder Woman. High durability. High regeneration rate. Unknown energy source, possibly magical or extradimensional. Suspected ocular powers not confirmed, but preliminary scans show eye energy buildup under mask or when using certain abilities. Transformation form capable of rivaling Kryptonians if not stronger. Potentially the most dangerous being on Earth when transformed due to sheer destructive abilities. Confirmed weaknesses. None recorded. Hypothesis. Transformation is time-limited or taxing. Avoid direct confrontation during this phase. Possible countermeasures. Massive energy dispersion weapon, create energy overload to destabilize form. Magical containment. Target his eyes. 3. Wonder Woman, Diana Prince. Strengths. Superhuman strength comparable to Superman in short bursts. Super speed. Immense combat skill, thousands of years of experience. Flight. Magical weaponry, lasso of truth, god-killing sword, indestructible bracers. Tactical intelligence. Immortality. Confirmed weaknesses. Limited ranged capabilities, reliance on close quarters. Possible susceptibility to emotional provocation tied to honor, warrior's code. Countermeasures. Sonics and immobilization nets by time delay. Indirect approach via subterfuge or decoy. Remote weapons with magical resistance. 4. Shazam, Billy Batson. Strengths. Super strength. Magis-infused lightning, versatile offensive, defensive use. Flight. Enhanced durability. Immortality while transformed. Confirmed weaknesses. Magic word, Shazam, reverts him to child form. Child mentality still present in decision-making. Countermeasures. Isolate and force transformation via verbal interruption. Sound disruptors to prevent speaking. Emotional manipulation, target immaturity or fear. 5. Flash, Barry Allen. Strengths. Super speed, FTL potential. Access to a phenomenon called speed force. Phasing. Enhanced healing. Confirmed weaknesses. Over-reliant on momentum, possible targeting while stationary. Countermeasures. High viscosity adhesive to prevent movement. 6. Green Lantern, Hal Jordan. Strengths. Power ring. Vast tactical training. Construct versatility. Energy projection and barriers. Flight. Survival in any environment. Confirmed weaknesses. Concentration-dependent constructs. Psychological fatigue reduces ring efficiency. Countermeasures. Surprise attacks during emotional duress. Fear toxin rendering the use of the ring impossible. 7. Cyborg, Victor Stone. Strengths. Technopathy. Adaptive weapon systems. Boom tube generation. Near-instant internet access. High durability and strength. Confirmed weaknesses. Digital feedback vulnerability. EMP disruption of systems. Still partially human, organic brain present. Countermeasures. EMP discharge devices. Psych attack via emotional trauma, memory loop trap via VR. Observational notes. Superman, highest raw power. Mind control risk confirmed. Max, unknown threat. Comparable to Kryptonians, possibly worse. Planetary destruction potential. Transformation should be feared. Wonder Woman, warrior mindset. Noble, but that honor can be exploited. Shazam, naivety is a risk factor. Magical power rivaling Diana. Flash, can assassinate anyone on the planet. Green Lantern, creative, but mentally burdened. Exhaustion is key. Cyborg, digital core can be corrupted if not protected. Bruce stared at the profiles for a long time. It was Max's file that disturbed him the most. Max Schiller. That transformation, whatever it was just too powerful. Even Superman seems less dangerous by comparison. He recalled how close they had come to losing Clark to the parademon conversion. If he hadn't been there to snap him out of it. Bruce clenched his jaw. His paranoia had been growing. If Superman could be turned, then Max can be too, and with that kind of destructive potential, it's not an exaggeration that he can single-handedly hold the planet hostage. He was broken out of his musings when he heard a familiar voice. "Here is some tea, Master Bruce," Alfred said, stepping into the cave and gently placing the tray on the desk. Bruce didn't turn, still typing. Alfred glanced at the monitor. His eyes scanned the screen, the encrypted log of every Justice League member. "Our guest has departed, I see," Alfred said, noting the empty cot behind him. "Yes. Just left," Bruce replied flatly. Alfred's eyes narrowed. "Is this necessary, Master Bruce?" There was a long pause. The only sound was the hum of machines. "Yes. It is," Batman finally replied. "Every single one of them poses a threat to the world if they ever go unchecked." "You truly believe they would go rogue?" "Not voluntarily. But they can be controlled. Or forced." He paused. His voice darkened. Clark nearly lost himself. "And Max? Max is a walking nuclear bomb. We don't know where he's really from or what he's capable of. If he ever turns, we need to have a way to stop him." Alfred's voice softened, but held firm concern. "But anyone can be controlled, even you, Master Bruce. You could just as easily find yourself in a situation where you're forced to make a hard choice." Bruce was silent. "Yes," he said eventually. "And when that happens, someone needs to be ready to stop me too." Alfred sighed. "All I will say is this path you're taking will breed mistrust. It will divide you when unity is what you need most. You're not gods, Bruce. You're living beings, all with flaws. But that's the point, isn't it? As protectors of Earth, you're supposed to cover each other's weaknesses, not exploit them." Bruce didn't respond. Alfred turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing into the cavernous dark. The silence returned. Bruce's hand hovered over the keyboard. A blinking prompt stared back at him. "Confirm file deletion." His finger lingered. Then he pressed yes. The file's erased. Bruce closed his eyes and slowly slumped back in his chair, tension draining from his shoulders, but not gone. Bruce sighed. As much as he wouldn't admit it, being the only normal human among them gnawed at him. The helplessness he had felt during the fight with Darkseid burned deep. It was a reminder that no amount of skill or preparation could fully bridge the gap between man and God. Still, he would not sit idle. Later that night, he went to another section of the Batcave, one of his more secret project areas. There, a set of blueprints glowed under the dim light, armor he had been designing. If perfected, it would at least give him a fighting chance against opponents even of Superman's caliber. Meanwhile, Max wasted no time making his way to the meeting spot Cyborg had given him. He waited in silence for a few minutes until the whirring of repulsors and servos filled the air. Cyborg landed in front of him and approached with a relaxed but purposeful stride. "Good to see you've recovered," Cyborg said. "Yes, I heal fast," Max replied. "Oh, I think I haven't properly introduced myself. My name is Victor Stone." Cyborg extended his hand. Max shook it firmly. "Nice to meet you, Victor. I know you know me as Pietro Maximoff, but that's just an alias, which I'll need your help fixing later. For now, call me Max." "Well, nice to meet you, Max," Victor said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "The reason I wanted to meet is because of a matter concerning your real identity." "I'm listening," Max replied, his expression sharpening. "Remember when your mask broke during the fight, and you didn't have a replacement? You were caught on multiple cameras, street cams, drones, even satellites. I was able to wipe all that footage before it could spread, but not before it was recovered by LexCorp and viewed by Luthor," Max finished, his eyes narrowing. "Yes," Victor confirmed. "Although I erased it, I believe he had already viewed the footage by then, and may be aware of who you really are." "That does present an issue," Max murmured, stroking his chin. "I'll pay him a visit, politely ask him to forget about it." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Will that work?" "Don't worry about it," Max said, already turning to leave. "Thanks for the heads up. I'll handle it." As he walked away, Max's mind wandered to a far more troubling thought: Darkseid. He knows that the tyrant is able to see through Cyborg, watching everything, listening to every word. The last thing Max could afford to do was tip Victor off. That information was better kept to himself, until the day it could be used. The best Max could do was tell Batman about it. After all, Bruce's paranoia wouldn't let him sleep without either creating a countermeasure or finding a way to remove the spyware from Cyborg. Max arrived at his apartment, expecting a quiet evening to gather his thoughts. But when he reached the door, it was already unlocked. His eyes narrowed. Pushing the door open, he stepped inside. The air felt undisturbed, yet his instincts screamed something was off. On his table sat a small device, a sleek, black hologram projector. Max picked it up, turning it over in his hand. No wires, no markings, nothing obvious, until it came to life. A shimmering image formed above it. The cold, composed face of Amanda Waller stared back at him. "Good evening, Mr. Maximoff," her voice echoed, sharp and unyielding. "By the order of the President of the United States of America, we would like you to cooperate with." Crack. The message was cut short as Max's fingers tightened, crushing the device in his palm. "It seems Luther wasn't the only one able to obtain that footage," he muttered darkly. "Or he shared it." His scowl deepened, eyes narrowing to slits. "You're playing a dangerous game, Waller, if you think you can order me." He tossed the crushed remains of the projector aside. Tomorrow's schedule had just changed, again. He already had a visit planned for Lex Luthor. Now Amanda Waller had made the list. Some things needed to be clarified, personally. End of chapter. Chapter 20. Max didn't care much about his identity being known, he had no glaring weaknesses to exploit. The mask was more about keeping his life private, avoiding constant attention, and preventing inconvenient situations like the one he was currently facing. Sliding open a drawer, he pulled out an old-fashioned phone and searched the internet until he found the number for LexCorp. With a decisive breath, he dialed. High above Metropolis, in the sleek, glass-paneled office atop Lex Tower, Lex Luthor stood staring out at the city's sprawling skyline. The door slid open softly, and Mercy stepped inside, her tablet cradled in one arm. "Sir," she said, "you've received a meeting request, from a very, special individual." Lex didn't turn immediately. "From whom?" "Tobi himself. He's also asked that Amanda Waller be contacted and invited." A slow smile crept across Lex's face as he finally faced her. "Perfect timing. Just as I was devising a plan to reach out to him, he's beaten me to the punch." He paused thoughtfully. "Seems I'm not the only one who knows his true identity." "Indeed," Mercy replied. "Shall I finalize the invitation and send word to Waller?" Lex nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Cancel everything else on my schedule. I'm not exactly a fan of Waller's, but this will be a gesture of goodwill towards our new hero, and a strategic move." Mercy arched an eyebrow. "You seem unusually eager for this meeting." Lex chuckled softly. "How could I not be? We're talking about someone who could rival Superman. The implications are enormous. And I suspect this meeting is more than just a social call." "His identity?" Mercy asked. "More than that," Lex said, his voice low. "It's about setting clear boundaries. We know who he is. If we provoke him, things could spiral out of control." "And your next move?" Mercy pressed. Lex's smile faded as he considered the question. "And besides, something tells me he isn't a hero, so we have to tread carefully," Luthor said, leaning back in his chair. "Why do you think so?" Mercy asked, eyebrow raised. "Think about it. We'd never heard a single thing about him before that day, neither heroic nor villainous. Which leads me to believe he only exposed himself because he was being threatened by Darkseid." "You mean he's just a neutral party who doesn't want to be bothered?" Mercy asked. "That's the probable possibility. I may be wrong, although I rarely am, but regardless, he's no hero. And if he ever decides we're a thorn in his side, he might just remove us." "I never thought I'd hear such words from your mouth," Mercy said with a smirk. "As unsavory as it is, I'm not a fool," Luthor replied coldly. "I know my capabilities, and I can recognize a threat I cannot yet handle. For now. But who knows about the future? Do you think he even has a weakness?" Mercy asked. "I'm 100% sure he does," Luthor said confidently. "And I'll find it in due time. Let me guess, because he's a threat like Superman," she said with mock sarcasm. "Of course he is. For all we know, he could be an alien too. That transformation we saw might not even be a transformation at all. It could be his true form." "Well, the DNA we pulled from his mask says he's 100% human," Mercy countered. Luthor ignored that detail entirely. "Speaking of his DNA, what have the scientists discovered so far?" "Well, nothing extraordinary has turned up yet. Tell them to keep searching," Luthor ordered. "There's something they're missing." "I'll notify them," Mercy replied, turning to leave. Luthor sat alone, hands steepled, his mind already working 3 steps ahead. The next morning. Three black cars rolled in a tight convoy through the streets of Metropolis, pulling up in front of LexCorp. Civilians slowed their pace, whispering and glancing curiously. The doors opened, and men in sharp black suits stepped out. One moved swiftly to the rear car, opening the door for Amanda Waller. She stepped out, eyes locked on the LexCorp tower, face unreadable. Without a word, she marched toward the glass doors, her guards flanking her in perfect formation. Two LexCorp security officers moved to block the way. "Ma'am," one said with a polite but firm tone, "Mr. Luther's orders, only you may enter. Your guards will need to wait outside." Waller's eyes narrowed. "That's not how I work. My security detail goes where I go." "Orders are orders," the other guard replied. Mr. Luther was very clear. She let the silence hang for a moment, her stare heavy enough to make both men subtly shift their stance. "Do you two know what happens to people who try to dictate my movements?" "Yes, ma'am," the first said, not breaking eye contact, but we're under his roof. "If you don't like the rules, we can reschedule your meeting." Waller's jaw tightened, but she glanced briefly over her shoulder at her men. "Hold position," she ordered. The guards stepped aside to frisk her. Waller allowed it, though her glare never left their faces. Once satisfied, they waved her through. From the top floor, Luther watched the exchange with his hands clasped behind his back. "She's here," Mercy said, entering the office. "And our guest of honor?" Luther asked without turning. "He hasn't shown up yet." "Then let's welcome our government friend in the meantime," Luther said with a thin smile. "You go wait for him." A swirl of leaves erupted in the middle of the road outside, drawing gasps from bystanders. When the motion stopped, Max stood there in a spotless white tuxedo, his trademark white mask reflecting the morning sun. Phones shot up instantly. "Oh my God, it's Tobi!" a woman exclaimed. Within seconds, the crowd began to swarm, people shoving forward to snap photos and record video. Max increased his pace, weaving through the throng until he reached the LexCorp entrance. He raised his arms to allow the security team to search him, only to be waved through. "No need, sir," one guard said. Mercy was already waiting just beyond the doors. "Good morning, Mr. Tobi. This way, please." Max nodded and followed her inside. As they stepped into the lift, Mercy pressed the top floor button. The doors slid shut, and the hum of the rising elevator filled the silence. "I have to admit, I'm surprised you came in a tuxedo," Mercy said, glancing at him. "It's a meeting," Max replied casually. "Got to look like I'm going to one. My usual outfit wasn't necessary. Besides," he turned his masked face toward her, "there won't be any fighting. And even if there is, I won't need it." "You've got quite the attitude, Mr. Tobi," Mercy said with a faint smirk. "Not attitude, facts," Max countered. "Or do you disagree?" "For now, I don't." The elevator chimed, and the doors slid open. Mercy gestured to a set of imposing double doors at the end of the hall. "Luther and Waller are inside." Max started forward, then paused at the threshold. "I'll be waiting for the day when you do," he said, his voice low but deliberate, before pushing the doors open. "Glad you finally made it, Mr. Tobi," came Luther's smooth greeting from within. End of chapter. What's up, everyone? I just wanted to apologize in advance if you spotted any mistakes in this chapter. I'll admit, I'm not the best when it comes to writing character interactions, but I did my best. Cold sweat smile. If there's anything you think should be changed or improved, let me know in the comments and I'll consider rewriting the chapter if necessary. Thanks for your understanding and support as always. Chapter 21. Max walked into the room, his eyes drifting over the luxurious portraits of Lex Luthor in heroic poses, alongside expensive paintings that adorned the walls. At the sleek triangular table sat two figures, Luthor and Amanda Waller, leaving one seat unoccupied. "I'm glad you accepted my request," Max said smoothly. "It saved me the annoying task of visiting each of you individually." "Well, who wouldn't want to meet the famous Tobi in person?" Luthor replied, rising slightly. "I should say I'm honored. Besides, as a businessman, I know first impressions matter, especially good ones." "Indeed," Max added, his gaze flicking toward Waller, unlike someone in particular. Waller interrupted sharply. "Let's get this over with. Some of us have more pressing matters to attend to." Max narrowed his eyes, then sat down and removed his mask, placing it deliberately on the table. "I guess wearing this mask in front of both of you serves no purpose," he said. "Which is one of the reasons I wanted to meet you. Can you clarify what you mean?" Luthor asked, feigning ignorance. Max paused for a moment. I'm aware that both of you are in possession of sensitive footage showing me without my mask. And what about it? Waller asked, her arms crossed. I'd like it erased, and forgotten, Max replied, a faint smile on his face. Oh, you mean that footage, Luther said, clasping his hands together. Its erasure can be arranged, depending on how far you're willing to go for it to be forgotten. I'm willing to go very far, Mr. Luther. Far enough to ensure anyone who has seen it ceases to exist, Max said, his tone now deadly serious. The smile vanished from Luther's face, and the atmosphere tensed. Is that a threat, Mr. Tobi? Waller asked, her voice sharp. Simply stating a fact, Max replied coolly. Interpret it how you like, but after the stunt you recently pulled, it's safest to take it as such. Well, that footage holds no importance to me, I've already seen it, so there's no reason to keep it, Luther said. Good. So, Miss Waller, Max prompted. Waller's eyes narrowed. Threatening me is tantamount to threatening the government. If you think your power lets you get away with coercion, you're mistaken. You may be strong, but you are not unbeatable. You haven't yet met your match. The footage will be erased, but remember this, you will regret testing me. She stood to leave, but suddenly, a projectile whistled past her face and embedded itself in the distant wall with a sharp bang. She turned to see a black rod, and Max's calm voice followed. I'm not done yet. Her fists clenched, but she remained seated, silently gritting her teeth. Well, easy now, Mr. Tobi, Luther said smoothly, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. Wasn't this supposed to be a meeting? I had to remind her, Max replied, it's bad manners to walk away during a meeting until it's adjourned. Luther raised an eyebrow. Well, then, what else do you want to make clear? Max leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. I'm glad you asked. You may plot against the heroes, or act against them, as you please. I will not interfere unless they explicitly request my aid, and that isn't cheap. You can even plot against me, as long as it doesn't affect me directly it's fine. He paused, pointing at Waller. Yesterday, I returned to my apartment to an unpleasant surprise courtesy of Miss Waller here. I hope it doesn't happen again, because I have no problem ensuring key positions belonging to the ones giving you orders in the government, or anyone involved, become vacant if necessary. And the same applies to you, Luther, and it would be a shame since you don't have an heir. However, Max continued, standing up and putting on his mask, at the moment, I have no reason to have any form of malicious intent towards you, Luther, and I hope it remains as such, and it also leaves room for business and transactions, it depends on how you play your cards. Luther smirked. Well, I'm looking forward to it. For your own sakes, Max said, his voice low and dangerous, heed my words. I have a lot of patience, but it has limits. You've been warned. With that, Max disappeared in a blur. Luther turned toward Waller. Well, he really isn't fond of you, Luther remarked casually. Waller's glare could have burned through steel. I'm leaving. And if he requests another meeting, don't bother calling me. She strode out, leaving Luther alone. He walked to the window, looking down at the city below. I'm curious how far you're willing to go, Pietro, he murmured to himself. But my reasoning is preventing me from satiating that curiosity even then, my pride won't allow me to take such a blatant threat lying down. Max appeared in an alleyway, then leapt away, hopping across rooftops at high speed. He glanced to his left and saw Superman, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern flying toward him. Max landed atop a tall building and waited as they touched down around him. Green Lantern was the first to speak. Samurai guy. My man, glad to see you're fine. I wish the feeling was mutual, Max muttered. And there he goes, dude, I was trying to be polite, Green Lantern said. Why are you even here? Max asked flatly. Well, Batman told us you had fully recovered and left, Superman explained. So we came to see you. And to thank you for helping us defeat Darkseid, Wonder Woman added. Don't sweat it. After all, it was either that or fleeing the planet, Max replied casually. Right. Anyway, there's a question that's been bugging me lately, are you an alien? Green Lantern asked. Well, kind of. I'll tell you some other time. Or just ask Batman, Max said. Yeah, I'll just wait for you to tell me, Green Lantern shrugged. Suddenly, an explosion echoed in the distance. Superman turned his head toward the sound. Well, that's my cue. I'm glad to see you're okay, he said before flying off. You know, you could have come to my apartment instead of ambushing me out of nowhere, Max remarked. Well, this was Green Lantern's idea, Wonder Woman replied. Not surprising. I could smell the idiocy, Max said. Hey, I have a tight schedule these days. I should have been enjoying my day off, but no, I chose to come see you, Green Lantern shot back. Well, the gesture is appreciated. It was nice seeing you, Max said, before vanishing in a puff of smoke. And he's gone, Green Lantern muttered. Was that even the real him? Wonder Woman asked. Green Lantern just shrugged before flying off. Meanwhile, Max sat atop his massive bird, soaring high in the sky as he looked at the endless desert stretching out before him. He had created a clone the moment he spotted the heroes approaching, he wasn't interested in talking to them. The bird dove, and Max jumped off before it reached the ground, landing with a heavy bang that scattered sand in all directions. He formed a single hand sign, and with multiple puffs, 20 shadow clones appeared before him. They nodded, then split into two groups and ran off in separate directions, one to train in mastering the Rasenshuriken, the other to attempt recreating the Chidori. Max was left alone. An idea sparked in his mind. Last time, he couldn't summon the Ghetto Mazo for some reason. He wanted to see if that had changed. He slammed his hand against the ground. A sealing array spread across the sand, the desert trembling before exploding upward. A massive hand emerged, followed by another, as the Ghetto Mazo rose with a deafening roar, Max standing atop its head. He looked at its sealed eyes and pondered. Since there are no tailed beasts or chakra in this world, what could I try as a substitute? In this world, only magic existed. Maybe demons, after all, they're the closest thing to tailed beasts other than magical creatures. Max summoned his system panel and checked it. 73%. Not bad, he muttered. He estimated that right now, he could open the gates up to the sixth gate. Combined with Madara's physical prowess, that wasn't bad at all. But he knew he still had to keep training, because the next template could very well end up being some weak-ass guy. End of chapter. Chapter 22. He thought back on the templates he had received so far. None of them had been outright bad, except for that one-time transformation ability. Still, even that had served its purpose, even if it hadn't let him finish the job. Looking back, maybe it was for the best. Some events weren't meant to be altered. Darkseid was one of them. A fixed point in time. Killing him too soon would only make the timeline unpredictable, trigger disasters he wasn't ready to face. Hell, if he had gone through with killing Darkseid, it could have done more than just warp history. It could have shattered the timeline completely, birthing the multiverse of infinite Earths. That was something Max absolutely could not allow. If there was one thing he had to prevent at all costs, it was that. With that thought, Max exhaled slowly and jumped down from the ghetto statue's shoulder, landing lightly on the desert sand. He brought his hands together, forming the ram seal. A sharp puff of smoke burst outward, dissipating into the dry air. When it cleared, Max blinked in mild disbelief. The statue was still there. Well, this presents a problem, he muttered, scratching the back of his head. In Naruto, when Madara had pulled the thing down from the moon, it hadn't disappeared either, it had stayed rooted to Earth. Maybe that was the same deal here. Which meant Max had to figure out what the hell to do with a colossal death statue standing in the middle of nowhere. He couldn't exactly haul it around, and leaving it out here in plain sight was asking for trouble. His train of thought was abruptly cut short when the air behind him shook with a thunderous explosion. Max winced as a flood of painful memories slammed into his head, his shadow clone's final moments, obliterated when a Rasenshuriken detonated prematurely. He sighed, rubbing at his temple. Figures. Forming another seal, he exhaled as 10 fresh clones popped into existence with a series of sharp puffs. Without needing instructions, they dashed off in the direction of the training site to pick up where the others had left off. Max planted his hands on his hips and turned back toward the towering Ghetto Mazo. He tapped his foot against the sand, brow furrowed in thought. What the hell was he supposed to do with this thing? He couldn't leave it unguarded, couldn't carry it with him, and didn't have a base to stash it in. For the moment, the desert was his only option. After a few moments of deliberation, he crouched and pressed his palms to the ground, weaving through a rapid sequence of hand seals. Wood style. Wood dome jutsu. The desert trembled violently as if something ancient stirred beneath it. Sand erupted skyward in a storm as titanic vines burst forth, twisting and spiraling around each other. They rose higher and higher, weaving into an enormous dome that enclosed the ghetto statue. Max didn't stick around to admire it. He stepped back quickly, retreating before the dome completely sealed shut. Against the endless tan horizon of the desert, the massive green structure stood out like a beacon. It was far from subtle. Still, it was temporary, and effective for the time being. Anyone nosy enough to come poking around wouldn't have an easy time. The dome would heal itself from damage, reweaving its vines if torn apart. Worse, it wasn't just a wall. Anything living that touched it, chakra or no chakra, would feel its strength sucked away as the dome fed on life force itself. Max crossed his arms, narrowing his eyes at the completed dome. Good enough for now. Max knew one thing now, he needed a base. Somewhere secure to store the ghetto statue, a place to train without being watched, and somewhere he could experiment with his cells. Creating white Zetsu clones or other minions would be useful: spies, soldiers, observers. Information was power, and having eyes and hands in the right places could make a difference. The heroes knowing his identity was another complication. Any questionable action would draw attention, and inquiries would follow. To avoid that, he considered the plan he had been developing since gaining the Rinnegan and pushing Madara's template further, the 6 Paths of Pain. With a few corpses, he could create extensions of himself like how Nagato had done with the 6 Paths of Pain to handle things without his direct involvement. They could enforce his will, handle threats, or allow him to operate outside usual restrictions. For now, though, that could wait. The desert sun was harsh. The heat pressed down on him relentlessly. "Goddamn, it's hot here," Max muttered, almost as an afterthought. With a simple gesture, perfect Susanoo unfolded around him. He launched into the sky, leaving the desert behind. Meanwhile, in Belle Reve, Amanda Waller sat in front of her laptop, watching the footage of Max. Clones training, the ghetto statue rising, and the Susanoo soaring overhead. She had reported her assessment to the leadership, suggesting ways to manage him, though she had left out her attempt to order him with the president's name. The instructions from above were clear: do not confront him. Others might fear him, but she did not. Waller's eyes narrowed as she watched the screen, considering her options. Max had made a stand, and for now, the best course was observation. But one day, she thought, she would either bring him under control, or make sure he could not interfere with her plans. She closed the laptop, already thinking ahead to her next move. Batcave. Batman's eyes narrowed at the satellite feed flickering across the Batcomputer's screens. Tobi's massive form moved with purpose, training in the middle of the desert. Training, Batman muttered. For someone already this strong, that's unusual. From behind him, Dick leaned back in a chair, boots up on the console, idly spinning a batarang between his fingers. "You really are obsessed with this guy," Dick said with a smirk. "I mean, he hasn't done anything, at least nothing you can pin on him. Or do you just suspect he's planning something?" Batman didn't look away from the screen. His choice of words when he was here were concerning. "You mean the part where he said he wanted to kill Darkseid?" Dick asked, sharp as ever. "And you're thinking that makes him a killer?" "Not thinking," Batman replied flatly. "Knowing. Most of his abilities are lethal by design. Even the techniques he's working on now look like killing blows." Dick shrugged, letting the batarang roll across his knuckles. "Maybe. But I don't blame him for wanting Darkseid dead. You saw what Darkseid was doing. Putting him down looked like the only real option." Batman finally turned, his gaze cutting into Dick. "What?" Dick raised an eyebrow. "You know as well as I do, that Darkseid only retreated because you and the others almost killed him after Tobi had weakened him." "Yes, Darkseid was a different case," Batman said firmly, "but we weren't trying to kill him, we were trying to contain him and figure out a way to send him back." Dick leaned back, tossing the batarang up and catching it lazily. "Contain him. The guy wanted to enslave us, Bruce. Wanted to turn people into mindless soldiers. Killing him wouldn't have been so bad." Batman's gaze hardened, his tone like stone. "It's never that simple. Killing should never be the first option, Dick." Dick frowned. "Even with someone like Darkseid. Especially with someone like Darkseid." Batman took a step closer, his cape brushing the floor. "Make no mistake, I acknowledge the threat he poses. If he ever comes back, and if there's no other way, then yes, we may be forced to end him. But you need to understand," his voice grew quieter, heavier, "crossing that line changes you. Once you kill, you can't go back. It doesn't end with one life. Killing attracts more killing. It pulls people into a cycle they don't escape from." Dick stayed quiet, the batarang stilled in his hand. "I've seen what it does, what it makes people become. I don't want that for you. Not ever." End of chapter. What's up, everyone? I know some of you have suggested that I focus on just one fanfic so I don't burn out, and I get where you're coming from. But honestly, working on multiple fanfics actually helps me. It gives me options and lets me take a break to think about something else whenever I hit a wall with one story. So, if the fanfic you like hasn't been updated in a while, It just means I'm still figuring out how to move the story forward. But one thing I can promise is this. I won't be giving up on any of my fanfics. Till next time. Chapter 23. Yeah, I know. Once we adopt the mindset of killing, we become no better than the criminals we are fighting, Dick said, standing up. I was just saying, anyways, I'm heading out. Want some pizza? No. More for me then, he said, walking out, leaving Bruce alone, who sighed. It had been years now since he had taken Dick in, yet the boy still hadn't truly let go of the death of his parents. At some point, he had wanted the person responsible for their deaths terminated, and Bruce knew exactly how that felt, having seen his own parents murdered in that alley. He knew Dick hadn't truly meant what he was saying, but it was hard to trust a justice system that often let convicts slip through the cracks. Even so, their presence made a difference. Even if only temporarily locked away, criminals were kept from harming others. Because, really, could you even imagine how Gotham would be if someone like Joker ran rampant every day of the week? Max stepped into the cave, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. He descended a series of natural stone stairs for several minutes until he reached the deepest part of the cavern, where it opened into a vast chamber. While returning from the desert, he had spotted this mountain and noticed the cave's entrance. That night, he returned, assigning clones to excavate deeper into the rock and reinforce it with wooden pillars using wood release. After a week of painstaking work, the chamber was finally prepared. He approached one of the walls and infused it with his chakra. A small seal formed and absorbed the energy, and one by one, lanterns along the walls ignited, illuminating the space. While Madara was not a master of sealing, he had extensive knowledge of barrier seals and sealing scrolls. Max utilized this understanding to craft a fully functional lightning system within the cave, powered entirely by his chakra, ensuring both illumination and security for his hidden lair. He had also learned the backlash of using too many clones at once or leaving them active for too long. Receiving too many shared memories at once had given him a splitting migraine, so he had limited his shadow clone usage to 5 for the Rasenshuriken and 5 for the Chidori and its variants. Even with this restriction, he had made significant progress. He could now form the Rasenshuriken, though not yet throw it, and had successfully recreated the Chidori along with some of its variations. Kirin, for now, was still off the table. Max then went through a sequence of hand seals and slammed his hand onto the ground. With a poof, the Geto Mazo appeared in the center of the chamber. Now, you might be wondering why he didn't just put it in his infinite storage space. The truth is that while the space was infinite in mass and quantity, it had limits on the size of the objects it could store. Which is reasonable, otherwise, what would stop him from going into space and just snatching the moon? He hadn't tested it with living beings yet, so he isn't sure if he could store a living creature inside. If he can, the infinite storage would effectively be broken. Anyone placed inside can only be released at his discretion. That would make it an unstoppable tool, or a terrifying trap. Max made a mental note to experiment with that possibility sometime. Now, the annoying part will be to the travel from his Starlight City to this place, a daunting task, given how far apart the locations are. Flying isn't much of a problem in itself, but he has to do it covertly to keep the location of his base a secret. The Flying Thunder God technique would be perfect for this, if he knows it, but recreating it is near impossible with its absurd requirements, and that is without even considering the effort needed just to replicate it. Sometimes he wondered why he hadn't been given Obito's template instead of Madara's. Things would be a lot simpler. Looking at the Geto Mazo before him and the base itself, it really does resemble the Akatsuki underground base from the anime. The only thing missing is a roster of powerful metas, then he would have a complete organization. But recruitment isn't necessary. Bringing others in would create loose ends, and that was the last thing he needed. Max then retraced his path to the cave entrance and walked straight through what appeared to be solid rock, actually just an illusion. At the mouth of the cave, he summoned his chameleon and jumped inside its mouth as it then turned invisible and scurried away. Sometime later, Max was flying atop his bird, deep in thought, because something really seemed off. When he had just left LexCorp after the meeting concluded, the heroes suddenly popped up to see him. He knew exactly they weren't there just to check on him. After all, if that was the case, why wouldn't they simply show up at his apartment since they already knew where he lived? After some deliberation, he came to a conclusion. Batman had been testing him, watching to see how he would deal with Luthor. Max didn't know if the other heroes were in on the test or if they had simply been asked by Batman to keep an eye on things, but the intent was clear. Batman had expected him to kill, or at least seriously harm, Luthor and Waller, and the heroes had been stationed nearby, ready to stop him. He may be wrong, but it was far too much of a coincidence to ignore. Though they still trusted him to some extent, as they had even invited him to a meeting to discuss the creation of the Super 8. He had no interest in being a part of it, but to be polite, he would attend. Luthor Estate. Are you sure you want to hand over Tobi's DNA samples and discoveries to the government? Mercy asked, raising an eyebrow at Luthor, who was lying on a massage table with a robot working his back. Yes, I am. It's not like we're handing them everything, Luthor replied casually. I'm only offering them a piece of it. I thought you wanted to be the only one to create a superweapon from his DNA along with Superman's, Mercy pressed. Yes, that was the intention. But from what I've observed, Tobi's DNA, while impressive to a degree, is far behind Superman's. Most of his power comes from his training, from what seems to be years of it. His DNA isn't worth much without the knowledge behind it. Unlike Superman, who won the species lottery and grows stronger simply by basking in the sun, like a lizard. Even if we managed to clone him, I doubt he'd be willing to come and train his clone for us. In fact, I might just be taking my last breath, Luthor said with a dry chuckle. Do you think they'll be able to successfully clone him? Mercy asked. Well, considering we failed with some of the best scientists at our disposal, I doubt it. Tobi's DNA is invasive. We tried combining it with Superman's, only for Superman's DNA to be devoured, turning the whole thing into an abomination, a wriggling, white mass of flesh. Cloning him directly only created white, lifeless, deformed husks. And the one that actually lived killed 4 of our scientists before security had to put it down. So, you're shelving the idea? Yes, for now. Besides, getting on the government's good graces isn't a bad thing. It's what's allowed me to get away with so much already. Luthor waved the robot off, climbed off the table, and poured himself a drink. He gulped it down before continuing, this even presents an opportunity, since you know who will be utilizing that DNA. Waller, I guess, Mercy said flatly. Bingo, Luthor smirked. So you're going to give them his DNA, then sell them out later? Mercy asked with a knowing smile. You make me sound like a bad person when you put it that way. I prefer to call it business, nothing personal. End of chapter. Chapter 24. Mercy looked at Luthor with a blank stare until he relented. Fine, maybe I am. But my plan is to let Waller and her government buddies attempt to clone him, or at least succeed in cloning him, before alerting him, as a favor of course, Luthor said. You despise Waller so much that you would have her killed for a favor, and besides, he'll do the same to you if he finds out you also attempted to clone him, Mercy replied. Well, I just have to make sure he doesn't find out, Luthor answered. And all that for a favor? Mercy asked. After all these years you still underestimate the importance of a favor. As a businessman, I understand the value of a favor, and I'm sure he does too. After all, he said it himself that he doesn't mind conducting business with me if I play my cards right. So I don't doubt that he'll repay the favor, and that is just setting up for the future when the dust settles, Luthor said, clasping his hands together. What exactly are you planning? Mercy asked, clearly intrigued. Well, I'm planning to pit him against the do-gooders. You see, Tobi will definitely kill Waller when he finds out they've been cloning him, and maybe some government officials too. I plan to let the whole world witness every bloody detail, and the heroes will come flocking to him in the name of justice. What if they turn a blind eye, after all? Tobi's actions would be a little bit justified, Mercy pointed out. I highly doubt that. But in the event that they do, I'll have motivate them to pursue him. As for how, I haven't thought of anything yet. And from what we know about Tobi, he won't be taken willingly, and if forced, he might just kill someone, Luthor said, smiling. Seems like a good plan, but it could backfire badly, Mercy said. Well, the risks will be worth it. I am willing to do anything to get rid of the man in red and blue tights, Luthor said, clenching his fist. Washington, D.C., STAR. Labs. Green Lantern, Flash, Wonder Woman, Superman, Shazam, Batman, and Cyborg sat around a massive table in silence, waiting for Max so they could begin the discussion. Finally, Hal broke the silence. Where is this guy? Did you even tell him we had a meeting, Batman? Green Lantern asked. Yes. He said he was coming, Batman replied. It's been 30 minutes already, Flash complained. We just have to be patient. He's coming, Superman reassured. Just then, the door opened. Max walked in and sat down. Sorry I'm late. Where have you been, dude? We've been waiting half an hour, Shazam said. I got held up on something, Max answered simply. Alright, since Tobi is here, let's get this started, Wonder Woman said. The reason for calling you all here, Superman began, is to establish a superteam and for Tobi to tell us everything he knows about Darkseid so we can be better prepared for him. Well, I'm cool with being on a team with you guys, Shazam said. New threats emerge every day. Forming a team seems like the most logical thing to do, Batman added. You mean, you actually support the idea? Green Lantern asked. Batman just stared at him for a while before replying, yes. You can count me in too. How about you, Hal? Flash asked. Yeah, why not? Wouldn't want to miss whatever craphole mess comes next, Green Lantern replied. Count me in as well, Diana said firmly. I apologize, Max finally spoke, but I won't be part of your group. Huh, why? Shazam asked. What, you think you're too cool to form a team with us or something? Green Lantern challenged. The hero stuff doesn't suit me. I'll leave that to you, Max replied. Come on, dude, we need you, Flash tried to convince him. Imagine all the good you can do with your power. You can save lives, Diana added. No means no, and there's nothing you can do to convince me, Max said flatly. Then can you at least share with us what exactly Darkseid is? Superman asked. Max sighed. Do you believe in the existence of abstract entities? You mean, abstract concepts exist as entities? Batman asked. Yes, Max said. Some of them aren't just ideas. They have form, thought, will, and power. They are beings responsible for governing the part of the universe they represent. What are abstract concepts? Shazam asked. Embodiments of death, life, time, space, creation, entropy, and so on, Cyborg explained. Oh, I see, Shazam said. Green Lantern folded his arms. You see that right there. That's bullshit. You can't expect us to believe abstract entities exist. When gods and magic exist, I don't know how you find it so hard to believe, Cyborg shot back. Come on, Vic. You can't blame us. Gods are one thing, but abstract entities. That's something else. I believe you. Continue, Batman said. Oh come on, not you too, Spooky, Green Lantern groaned, throwing his hands in the air. My mother always told me there were beings above the gods, though she never specifically mentioned them. I think it might have been them, Diana said thoughtfully. Well, believe it or not, they exist, Max replied. And Darkseid is one of them, a being who exists outside of the physical multiverse. He is the very embodiment of evil and tyranny in its purest form, driven by the desire of depriving all life in the multiverse its freedom. There was silence in the room. All right, that's enough bullshit for one day. I'm outta here, Green Lantern said, standing up. Let's just give him a chance, Hal. As absurd as it is, it seems important, Barry said. You too, Barry. Green Lantern shouted in disbelief. He looked around the room, then finally relented. Fine. Please continue with the fairy tale, he said as he sat down. Please continue, Superman added. As an abstract entity, he cannot descend to the physical multiverse because it would mean the end of it, given how powerful and vast he is, Max said. Huh, then who was the guy we fought? Shazam asked. That was his avatar, which was not even close to his true self, Max replied, letting everyone digest that information before continuing. He maintains his influence on the physical multiverse by sending avatars to act in his stead, like puppets. Why are you telling us all this? Diana asked. Because you need to know it so that you don't hold back when he returns. Though killing him is inadvisable, Max said. I'd be impressed by that guy's tenacity if he returns after the beating we gave him, Shazam said. Believe me when I say he will, Max replied. And why shouldn't we kill him? Diana asked. Because he is a fixed point in time. In all timelines, Max said. I think Barry understands this part better than anyone. They all turned to Barry, who explained, when something is a fixed point in time, it means that it must always happen to keep the timeline intact. If it's an event, it must always occur. If it's an individual or object, it must always exist. I think you're forgetting something, Barry, so I'll add it for you. If this thing is removed from the timeline collapses and resets. That means all of you would be rewritten and exist again, but it wouldn't be the same you. Well, that's the best case scenario. End of chapter. Hey guys. Sorry for the info dump earlier, but I just had to get that out of the way. Quick question. Should I move on to the plot of the next movie, or keep exploring the current story a bit longer? Let me know what you think. Chapter 25. Well, what is the worst case scenario? Superman asked. Just know that it's not good at all, Max replied. How do you know so much about him? What even are you? Wonder Woman pressed. I just know a lot. But don't worry, Darkseid isn't unbeatable. As you've seen, you just need to be prepared, Max said. You haven't answered the other question, Batman reminded him. Am I being interrogated now? Max asked, turning to Batman. Oh, come on, dude, you've gotta tell us. I mean, you know all about our powers, but we don't know much about yours, Shazam whined. Everyone turned to look at him. What? Am I the only one who's curious? I want to know too, especially about that transformation, Flash added. Max looked around the room. The others hadn't voiced it, but he could see their expectant gazes. He knew very well that one day their ideals might clash, and information was a powerful tool, especially in the hands of someone like Batman. He wouldn't be surprised if Batman had already come to his own conclusions about his arsenal of abilities, conclusions that were bound to be mostly correct, if not entirely accurate. I'm 100% human, Max finally said. And that transformation was temporary. I don't even know if I can access it again. As for my abilities, I cannot tell you. Come on, dude, just tell us, Flash pressed. No, Max said flatly. Cyborg leaned forward. Then can you at least tell us what we need to do to be prepared for Darkseid's next invasion? You just need to prevent a boom tube from being opened on our side, Max replied. That's how he gets to Earth. And if he does manage to get through, just be ready to give it your all to send him back. Silence fell for a moment. Then Max turned to Batman. Well, if there isn't anything else, I'd like to speak with you in private. Batman stood, giving a silent nod, and motioned for Max to follow him as they left the room. I wonder what they're going to discuss, Green Lantern muttered. It seems to be a sensitive matter, Cyborg said as he rose from his seat. Well, I have somewhere else to be, if you don't mind, Shazam said, stretching. Yeah, I'm leaving too, Green Lantern added. One by one, the others started to disperse. Max walked alongside Batman until they were a safe distance away from STAR Labs. Batman finally spoke. What did you want to discuss? A serious matter, Max replied. I'm listening. You know about the incident that resulted in Cyborg's creation, right? Yes, I'm aware, Batman said. Then you should also know, Cyborg was created from Darkseid's mother box. That means Darkseid still has access to him. Batman's eyes narrowed. How much access are we talking about? Enough to see and hear whatever Cyborg sees and hears, Max said grimly. So you need to be careful what you say or do in his presence. And, need I say, don't alert him to this fact. It might be the only edge we have. Darkseid's next invasion is inevitable, Max said. This will let us lull him into a false sense of security, give us the chance to lure him into a trap. Which is where you fit in. I need you to do what you do best. Batman's eyes narrowed. And what's that? Make countermeasures, Max replied. Batman was silent for a long moment, then gave a single nod. I'll see what I can do. Good. And if you need my help, you know where to find me, Max added. Then his lips curved slightly. Though I'd appreciate it if you don't call me just to save someone falling off a bridge. I've got better uses of my time. Before Batman could respond, Max's body sank into the ground, vanishing without a trace, leaving the Dark Knight standing alone in the shadows. Batman stared at the spot where Max had vanished, deep in thought. Tobi had deliberately withheld information, both about his origin and the true extent of his abilities. From what he had shared, it was clear Darkseid could spy through Cyborg, which might explain his secrecy. But Batman couldn't ignore the other possibilities. Perhaps Tobi didn't trust them, knowing that knowledge of his abilities could one day be used against him. Or perhaps he had plans of his own, plans the League might oppose, and withholding information gave him the upper hand. Endless possibilities swirled in Batman's mind. Yet the most likely scenario was also the simplest. Tobi didn't want Darkseid knowing anything that could compromise him. Only time would tell. Meanwhile, Max walked casually through the quiet streets of Starling City, the moonlight painting everything in silver. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to simply enjoy the peace. Ever since he arrived in this world, life had been nothing but fighting and surviving. Recently, training had to the list as well. He hadn't given himself a chance to breathe, let alone consider living. Maybe even having a relationship. But honestly, in the 600th world, something like that was almost impossible, especially for someone like him. The only reason he wasn't being targeted constantly was because he had no visible weaknesses. No family, close friends, lover. Nothing his enemies could exploit. And yet, lately, he felt the loneliness gnawing at him. When he first woke up here, he had told himself that relationships in the DC universe were chains that dragged people down into despair. He had seen it too many times in the comics, the shows, the movies. For once, in all his time in this world, he truly missed home. Back there, he had it all: friends, family, his parents. A warmth he hadn't realized he'd taken for granted. A tear slipped down his left cheek before he even noticed. He quickly wiped it away, muttering under his breath. Mother, father, I hope you're doing great. Even without me. Planet Apocalypse. Darkseid sat upon his throne, his crimson eyes locked on the feed streaming directly from Cyborg. The so-called heroes had no idea he was watching their every move through their mechanical ally. Their ignorance would be their downfall. Yet, something gnawed at his thoughts, the one they called Tobi. The upstart who had humiliated him. Darkseid had faced countless foes across the cosmos, even the guardians of Oa, yet this mortal intrigued him more than most. Tobi was unlike the others. He was no Kryptonian, Amazon or a lantern, and yet, he was all-rounded, adaptable, a being without a clear weakness. That, above all else, made him dangerous. He tapped a button on the armrest of his throne. A holographic projection of Desaad shimmered to life, bowing deeply. Yes, sire. Desaad rasped. How far is the progress on the creation of the superweapons? Darkseid's voice rumbled. It proceeds well, my lord. In a few years, they shall be ready, sufficient to kill both Superman and Tobi, Desaad replied carefully. Unacceptable, Darkseid snarled. His eyes glowed faintly with the threat of Omega energy. Accelerate the process. And prepare the Genesis chamber. Desaad's head snapped up, eyes widening. The Genesis chamber, my lord. It is still untested. Do as I command, Darkseid cut him off. As you wish, Desaad muttered, bowing lower before the transmission cut. Darkseid leaned back, the shadows of Apocalypse flickering across his face. The Genesis chamber, a new device forged by Desaad, designed to harness and refine the Omega effect, strengthening Darkseid's own body beyond its current limits. The next time he set foot on Earth, he vowed, it would not be as an invader. It would be as a conqueror, and he would leave nothing behind but ash and ruin. 3 years later, Max opened his eyes to find himself in a blindingly white room. Sterile and empty, save for a single bed. He tried to turn his head, to move his arms, yet his body refused to obey, moving instead on its own, as though on autopilot. His body rose from the bed without his consent, feet carrying him across the spotless floor. 4 cameras, one in each corner, silently tracked him. He could feel their gaze burning into his skin. Then, hiss. The door slid open. 4 figures stepped inside, dressed in pristine white lab coats. Each carried cold, metallic medical instruments that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. They did not speak. They simply advanced. Max's body began backing away, trembling, pressing itself against the far wall. He wanted to fight, to lash out, but he was nothing more than a prisoner inside his own flesh. The figures grew larger with every step, towering shadows swallowing the room. At first, Max thought they had changed, become giants. But then a dreadful realization seeped into him. They weren't bigger, he was smaller. His hands, tiny. His legs, frail. His reflection in the wall's polished surface revealed a child's face staring back at him. He had been reduced to nothing but a child. End of chapter. Chapter 26. But something was wrong, his body looked feminine. Before he could fully analyze his reflection, the scientists pulled him back, preparing to inject something into him. Then, darkness. His body's eyes had closed. When he regained vision, chaos had already begun. The scientists were gasping for breath as massive vines erupted from the ground, wrapping tightly around them. Before his eyes, their bodies shriveled, skin wrinkling as if their very vitality was being drained away. Their movements ceased, and they were dropped unceremoniously to the floor as the vines retreated into the earth. Alarms blared. Smoke filled the room. His body staggered, trying to cover its mouth, but his vision warped, and he collapsed face first. The doors hissed open, armored personnel stormed in with guns raised, then darkness again. Max woke with a sharp gasp, drenched in sweat. Lightning crackled along his right hand as his eyes darted around the room. Only when he was sure he was alone did he let the Chidori fade, running a shaky hand through his hair to calm himself. This had been going on for a whole week. Sometimes he was in total darkness, with no sensory organs, yet he could still feel the space around him. Other times his body was disfigured, missing limbs, crawling like some grotesque zombie while cold voices muttered, "Another failure. Terminate it." If the signs hadn't been clear before, now they were. Someone was tampering with his DNA. He didn't yet know who, but he was certain of one thing. That was would release. And whoever was responsible, would die. U.S. Haven 9 facility. Haven 9 was a small, isolated island just off the eastern seaboard of the United States. Originally a government weapons experiment site, it had been transformed into Haven 9 after the acquisition of Tobi's DNA for high-risk experimentation. The island's compact design featured a central complex of labs and observation wings, interlinked by covered walkways. Peripheral bunkers and guard towers patrolled the shorelines, and the entire facility was reinforced to withstand both natural and human threats. Observation rooms were equipped with one-way glass, surveillance cameras, and multiple monitoring stations, allowing scientists to observe experiments without risking exposure. Waller strode down a sterile corridor, her expression unreadable, flanked by Dr. Benjamin Mackenzie, the lead scientist, glasses perched neatly on his nose, and a crisp lab coat emphasizing his position. "How is the progress on the development of the asset?" Waller asked, her voice precise and steady. Benjamin adjusted his glasses. 2 days ago, during the routine sedation checkup, some staff members got complacent. They attempted a manual approach instead of using the anesthetic gases protocol dictates. The subject, she isn't used to human contact, reacted violently and awakened her abilities inherited from her father. From her father's side. Waller raised an eyebrow. "Let's just say she's more special than you think," Benjamin replied, offering a faint smile as he handed over a tablet containing detailed information about Thena. "I see," Waller murmured, briefly scanning the data. The observation room came into view, lined with one-way glass. Inside, the black-haired girl sat strapped into a reinforced steel chair, her limbs clamped securely. A neural helmet, its intricate circuits glowing faintly, was fitted over her head. Around her, a dozen scientists moved with urgent precision, checking monitors, typing into consoles, and adjusting data slates. Armed guards stood silently at the corners of the room, eyes scanning for any disturbance. "And what is this procedure?" Waller asked. "We are accelerating her cognitive development," Benjamin replied. Her physical growth outpaced her biological age. While she now appears 11, she is biologically only 3. Using a combination of neural mapping and adaptive cognitive frameworks, we are uploading education, language, and tactical programming directly into her mind. This allows her mental development to align with her physical appearance, making her more receptive to training and controlled conditioning. Waller's eyes narrowed. "Explain the risks." "Her mental development is accelerated artificially," Benjamin said. "If the upload exceeds her capacity, it could lead to cognitive dissonance, behavioral instability, or violent outbursts. That's why we limit the information and segment the uploads into modular increments. We also have neural dampeners built into the helmet, allowing us to pause or reverse certain functions if necessary." "Is she compliant?" Waller asked, her tone unreadable. "Mostly. There is a natural resistance, but the system is designed to adapt. Should she reject a segment, the neural helmet modulates her synaptic pathways, temporarily suppressing the rejection without causing permanent harm." Waller studied the girl through the glass. Her eyes gleamed with curiosity, not for empathy, but for the assessment of potential. "How long until she is ready for training?" Benjamin consulted his tablet. 1 week. By then, her mind should match her physical age, and she will be capable of basic operational training. Waller nodded. "Good. Prepare all necessary combat modules and monitoring contingencies. I want no surprises. She is our future asset, and failure is not an option." Benjamin gave a curt nod. "Understood." Max leapt from rooftop to rooftop, the lights of Metropolis blurring beneath him as he closed in on LexCorp. There are plenty of people who dabble in cloning heroes in this world, he thought grimly. But 3 stand out above the rest. The first, and most likely, was the government. They had the resources and the facilities. Cadmus in particular had a long, ugly history of recreating people. The second was Lex Luthor himself. If there was an opportunity to twist a hero's legacy into his own weapon, Lex would never pass it up. And the third, Ra's al Ghul. Though the League of Assassins preferred resurrection in bloodlines over science, he was dangerous enough to never rule out entirely. Still, that was unlikely. Which left the government as the prime suspect. But whether or not they were the ones pulling the strings, Max was sure of one thing: Lex Luthor knew something about it. Lex Luthor's office. Mercy stepped into the office, heels clicking against the polished floor. Luthor stood with his back to her, gazing out the massive windows of LexCorp Tower as if the city itself were some farm he could harvest. Our spy has reported that they've succeeded in cloning Tobi, Mercy said flatly. Luthor's lips curled into a wry smile. Waller actually succeeded where I failed. Well, that's a first. The location remains classified, Mercy continued. Even our contact couldn't pinpoint it. He and the other scientists were blindfolded during transport, rotated multiple times, and their equipment confiscated. But, she paused, adjusting her tablet. He said the air carried a faint saline density and bird population consistent with an isolated ecosystem. Cross-referencing with all islands off the U.S. eastern seaboard, then eliminating those too small to house a facility, or too public to hide one, only one matches. Rose Island. Luthor finally turned, eyes gleaming. So, the chessboard is set. Excellent. Is everything prepared? He expected an immediate response, but silence answered him. Frowning, he looked over to Mercy, only to find her crumpled unconscious on the floor, a black seal glowing faintly on her forehead. Standing over her, rage burning in his lone visible eye behind the mask, was Max. Ah, Pietro, Luthor smirked despite the sudden chill in the room. What a pleasant surper. His words choked off as Max's hand clamped around his throat, lifting him off the ground with terrifying ease. Blue sparks of lightning danced across Max's right palm, the hiss of energy echoing through the office. I actually thought you were smart, Luthor, Max growled through gritted teeth, but I overestimated your intelligence. What are you talking about? Luthor managed, his calm facade cracking under the pressure. The lightning in Max's hand fizzled out, replaced by something far darker. A black rod of chakra materialized in his palm. Without hesitation, Max drove it into Luthor's shoulder. AGHH. Luthor screamed, pain ripping through him. You thought you could manipulate me. Max snarled, twisting the rod cruelly. Suddenly, the office windows exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Superman hovered in the air, cape billowing as shards of glass rained around him. He had been on his usual patrol when he heard the scream from LexCorp, and arrived just in time to see Max holding Luthor like prey. Superman, Max said without turning, lightning crackling alive in his free hand again. How nice of you to join us. Max, let him go, Clark said firmly, stepping forward, voice calm but commanding. Whatever he's done, he'll answer for it in court, not here. Max's single visible eye narrowed. Save your breath, Superman. I won't kill him. But. Splurt. Luthor's scream tore through the office as blood spattered across the floor. Superman's eyes widened. End of chapter. Haha, another cliffhanger smile with horns. Chapter 27. Luthor cried out in pain as Max's Chidori severed his left arm. No. Superman shouted, rushing forward. Max flung Luthor toward him. Clark caught him, grimacing as blood dripped from the cauterized stump. The wound was sealed, but the black rod buried deep in his shoulder remained. When Clark looked back, Max was gone. Mercy stirred as the seal broke, groaning weakly. Seeing she was fine, Clark shot out the window with Luthor in his arms, heading straight for the hospital. He had a gut feeling Max wasn't finished. A short distance from LexCorp, Max stood atop a building. Forming a hand sign, he summoned a clone in a puff of smoke. Leave nothing alive, he muttered. The clone nodded and leapt away toward Rose Island. Max had spared Luthor for two reasons. First, despite being a menace, Luthor had proven useful whenever the entire world was threatened. Second, killing him here would have triggered a fight with Superman, one Max might have been forced to end permanently if escape became difficult. But Amanda Waller is a different matter entirely. She had been directly involved in his cloning. And for that, she would die. Summoning his bird, Max leapt from the rooftop and soared toward the direction of Bel Rev. At Metropolis General, Superman landed hard at the emergency entrance, cradling the unconscious Luthor. The automatic doors slid open and doctors rushed toward him the moment they saw the mangled state Lex was in. He needs immediate surgery, Clark said quickly, urgency sharp in his voice. Left arm severed, shoulder impaled, stabilize him now. Understood, Superman. Leave it to us, one of the nurses replied as they wheeled Luthor away, already barking orders to prep the operating room. Clark stood there for a moment, watching as Luthor disappeared down the hallway. Seeing his greatest rival in that broken, helpless state hit him harder than he'd expected. They were enemies, yes, but never, not once, had he wished something like that upon him. Still, the question gnawed at him. What atrocity had Lex committed to drive Max to this point? From what Clark had seen in Max's eyes, the boy wasn't just fighting, he was furious. Clark pressed the communicator in his ear. Superman to all Leaguers, he said grimly. It's Max. He has attacked Luthor. Nearly killed him. From the looks of it, Lex either did something, or played a role in something, that has pissed him off. There was silence for a heartbeat before he added, all right. Meet you there. Without waiting, he shot back into the sky, a red and blue streak tearing away from the hospital. Batman lowered his hand from his ear, processing Superman's message. He already knew why Max had gone after Luthor. 2 years ago, he had uncovered what was happening on Rose Island. He had gone there himself, shut down their operations, and warned Waller. He told no one else, not even the League. If Max ever found out, his reaction would be violent, but it seemed Waller hadn't listened. In the past 3 years, Max had killed no more than 67 people, rapists, mass murderers. Batman overlooked it. Fear of the ghost from hell had cut crime rates in half. No one could prove it was Max. His stealth was exceptional. Victims were found without injuries, their souls seemingly ripped away. After reviewing the Darkseid footage, Batman had concluded Max was responsible. But things were escalating. Max was no longer targeting criminals, he was striking at influential figures, which is a problem. Luthor had supplied Waller with Max's DNA. That was reason enough for the attack. Which meant Waller would be next. Batman exhaled slowly. If they tried to bring Max in, he would resist. And given his power, millions of lives could be lost in the crossfire. He still hadn't found a reliable countermeasure. Max was too well-rounded. His only weaknesses were the obvious ones: he was alive, and most of his abilities were tied to magic. Other than that, there's nothing else. Max's clone darted across the ocean's surface, his body cloaked in crackling lightning chakra. A thunderous sonic boom trailed behind him as he closed in on Rose Island. The moment he reached striking distance, heavy turrets erupted from beneath the ground, spitting bullets and missiles in his direction. Max leapt skyward, cheeks puffing before releasing a massive fireball that streaked down like a meteor. It slammed into the defenses, detonating in a thunderous explosion that left most of the turrets reduced to molten wreckage. He landed on scorched earth, his left hand sparking with lightning that stretched into a long blade. With a swift spin, the clone sliced through the remaining turrets, dismantling them in a single strike. The lightning cloak flickered out. In its place, a ribcage-shaped Susano erupted around him, spectral arms tearing into the ground. With a guttural rip, it wrenched free a buried metal slab, tossing it aside to reveal an underground entrance. Max stepped inside, the corridor lit with crimson warning lights as evacuation sirens blared. Scientists scurried like panicked insects, their eyes widening in horror before they turned and fled. His right hand surged with power, lightning condensing into a Chidori-sharp spear. He swung, the crackling blade carving through steel walls with ease. Silence followed, broken only by the shrill alarms, until heavy footsteps echoed ahead. A squad of soldiers marched into view, rifles raised in tight formation. They opened fire instantly, the hail of bullets rattling down the hall. Max clapped his hands together, summoning a wooden wall that rose to shield him from the storm of lead. The ground trembled as he formed another set of seals. Massive vines burst forth, snaking through the hallway. Soldiers scrambled in panic, but the living wood caught them, constricting and crushing until the screams faded beneath the blaring alarms. The clone raced down the hallway, lightning sparking off his body, when, boom. A deafening explosion tore through the facility, flames swallowing him whole. Deeper inside, Dr. Benjamin whipped his head around, the walls trembling from the blast. He cursed under his breath as he slapped his palm against the biometric scanner. The heavy doors hissed open, and he rushed in with 2 soldiers at his back. On the metal bed lay a small girl, strapped down by clamps and fitted with a bulky headpiece humming as it transmitted information to her head. Benjamin's lips twisted, half in pride, half in desperation. My greatest achievement, I won't abandon her, I have worked too hard to create her. His hands trembled as he typed furiously at the console. With a hiss, the restraints snapped open and the helmet disengaged. Get her, Benjamin ordered. One soldier holstered his rifle and reached down, but before he could lift her, the girl sprang to life. Thena launched herself at him, fists pounding his face with wild fury. The other soldier brought the butt of his gun down on her skull. Crack. And she collapsed, dazed. Careful, damn you. Benjamin snarled, his voice breaking with panic. She is priceless, more valuable than all of us combined. Hurt her, and you doom years of research. Thena's eyes snapped open, blazing with will. She raised her hand, and with a low rumble the ground split. Vines as thick as tree trunks erupted, coiling around the guards and Dr. Benjamin. They struggled uselessly as the foliage bound them tighter. She had waited for this opportunity. Every escape attempt before had ended with sedation, her mind forced back into darkness. But the knowledge they'd pumped into her only sharpened her hunger to see the world outside these steel walls. Now, at last she would finally see the world. Without hesitation, she bolted barefoot down the corridor. Her hair whipped behind her as she passed door after door, each chamber worse than the last, rows of grotesque, malformed human experiments floating in glass tubes, their pale, twisted bodies suspended in milky fluid. She forced herself not to look or to think. Just run. But then she turned a corner. A guard stumbled toward her, one arm severed, blood spraying with each step. His eyes were wide with terror, mouth opening in a wet gurgle. Thena froze. She had never seen so much blood. Then, in an instant, a lightning blade burst through his chest. The soldier convulsed, choking on his own screams, before collapsing in a pool of crimson. Out of the haze of smoke and fire stepped Max's clone, his clothes scorched, his lone Sharingan burning. His killing intent poured down the hallway like a suffocating fog. Thena locked eyes with him. And the world shattered. Visions crashed into her mind, herself dying, again and again, torn apart, burned alive, strangled, crushed. Each death more gruesome than the last. She screamed, clutching her head, as the ground itself began to quake. And then, boom. From outside, the entire island erupted as colossal vines burst skyward, writhing like titanic serpents and tearing through steel and stone. End of chapter. Notice. Yo, what's up peeps? Some of you have been asking about Thena's appearance, you can find it at the end of the chapter in the comments. Just imagine her without the armor and a little younger. As for Max, I couldn't find a suitable picture that really fits him, so I'll trouble you guys to come up with some based on the way I described him. And I'll pick the best one. Also, quick heads up, to keep this fanfic diverse and unpredictable, I'll be mixing in plots from other DC franchises, gotta keep you all entertained. And yes, the next chapter drops in 48 to 72 hours, so stay tuned. Chapter 28. 5 minutes earlier. An explosion ripped through the facility, Max's clone caught dead center. The blast tore its way up to the surface, dust and debris raining down as a thick cloud of smoke rolled through the corridors. When it cleared, Max's clone stood there, lightning sparking violently across his body. With a grunt, he deactivated the lightning cloak, muttering, "Damn, that was close." The bastards had wired the place with more explosives than he expected, trying to slow him down. If not for conserving chakra, unsure of what else might be waiting deeper inside, this would have ended a lot sooner. He glanced at the Kavedan corridor ahead. Stone and steel completely blocked the passage. Lightning surged across his clenched fist, and with a single strike, he shattered the debris into dust. The path clear again, he pressed forward. Turning a corner, gunfire erupted. Bullets clanged uselessly against the ribcage of his Susanoo as it flared to life. He weaved through hand seals. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. His chest expanded, then a roaring inferno blasted down the corridor. In the confined space, the firestorm became an execution ground. Screaming men scrambled to escape, but the flames engulfed them before they could flee. Only one soldier survived, ducking into a side passage just in time. The fireball struck the wall and detonated, the shockwave searing half the man's face. He staggered against the wall, clutching his gun, teeth clenched against a scream as his skin peeled and bubbled. For a moment, silence fell. Then, crack, a lightning spear burst through the wall, tearing into his shoulder and severing his arm at the elbow. The soldier shrieked in agony, stumbling backward, leaving a smeared trail of blood as he tried to flee. Max's clone turned the corner leisurely, destroying every lab he passed. Glass tubes shattered under his strikes, releasing grotesque shapes suspended in green nutrient fluid. Some were malformed husks, others twisted into monstrous flesh growths. A few looked almost human, pale and still. A handful were alive, but misshapen, abominations. He followed the bleeding soldier unhurriedly, like a predator toying with prey. At last, the man collapsed, strength gone. Raising his hand, Max's clone summoned the screeching roar of 1,000 birds, the Chidori. Lightning stretched into a spear, which he drove clean through the soldier's chest. The body slumped lifelessly to the ground. And that's when he saw her. A girl. Young. Black hair. standing in the hall, staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. His killing intent flared, instinctive, unrestrained. The girl dropped to her knees, clutching her head as she screamed in terror. The facility groaned. The ground cracked. Then the earth erupted as massive vines tore upward, ripping through concrete and steel, threatening to bring the entire complex down. Present scene. The island shook violently as colossal vines tore free from the ground, splitting concrete and ripping apart steel like paper. Max's clone burst upward from the crumbling facility, his ribcage Susano shielding him as he shot into the open air. Dispelling it mid-leap, he twisted his body, narrowly slipping past the whip-like vines that lashed toward him. He landed in a crouch, then sprang backward, somersaulting out of reach as the vines slammed into the earth with bone-shaking force. The ground convulsed again. Even more vines erupted, intertwining and stretching high into the sky. At their peak, they formed a living platform, carrying the black-haired girl from before. She stood upon it, chest heaving, eyes wide with fear and strain. Then the vines moved. They wrapped around her body, forming a cocoon. The structure pulsed once with green light before being drawn downward, merging into a massive wooden shape. The earth split apart. Roots and vines coiled together, twisting and thickening until a towering humanoid monstrosity took form. The cocoon was pulled into its chest as if absorbed, and the creature threw its head back with a thunderous, primal roar that rattled the entire island. Max's clone froze for a moment, disbelief flashing in his eyes. Chakra. This girl, she has chakra. And not just chakra, her wood release radiated with raw power, more potent than anything he himself could muster. But it wasn't controlled. With his Sharingan, Max clone could see it clearly. Ordinary vines erupting from the earth, instantly infused with her chakra, hardened and strengthened until they became weapons of living wood. It was as if the forest itself was defending her, instincts taking over where her will faltered. She didn't even seem like she knows what she is doing. A slow grin spread across his face. This is going to be fun. His Susano surged to life in full humanoid form, its armor gleaming with spectral light. Max's clone rose to float at its chest, the construct's towering height now rivaling the wooden titan across from him. The two giants locked eyes, red blazing against green. And then, as if drawn by an unspoken challenge, they charged. Back inside the collapsed facility. Dr. Benjamin dragged himself across the rubble-strewn floor, each movement sending white-hot agony tearing through his body. His ruined legs left a thick, glistening trail of blood in his wake, marking his path like a beacon of suffering. Sweat and saliva dripped from his clenched teeth, his ragged breathing echoing in the suffocating silence. When the wooden tendrils had first erupted, they'd thrown debris everywhere. His men hadn't been so lucky, a slab of concrete had crushed them instantly. He had managed to dive aside, but at the cost of both his legs, severed clean by the falling wreckage. Glancing back, he saw one of his soldiers' arms sticking out from under the rubble, limp and pale. The sight twisted something in his gut, but survival instinct drove him forward, clawing through broken glass and stone. As he dragged himself past a partially intact lab, his eyes widened. One of the containment tubes was fractured, nutrient solution hissing in thin sprays through widening cracks. Inside floated a grotesque, pale mass of flesh, veins pulsing faintly beneath translucent skin. The glass gave way with a deafening shatter. The nutrient solution splashed over him, cold and reeking of chemicals. Dr. Benjamin shielded his face with one arm, sputtering as the stench filled his nostrils. Then, squelch. The mass hit the floor in a wet heap. For a heartbeat, it was still. Then it twitched. Then it moved. Benjamin's breath caught. Horror froze him in place as the mound of flesh began dragging itself across the floor, tendrils of muscle and sinew stretching outward like grasping hands. Panic surged, and he spun around, crawling faster, clawing at the tiles, leaving bloody streaks in his desperate flight. But it was faster. The flesh latched onto his bleeding stumps with a sickening slap. He screamed, the sound raw and animal, echoing through the shattered corridor. The thing pulsed as it clung tighter, tendrils worming into torn muscle and veins. No. No. Get off. He twisted, grabbing the abomination with both hands, trying to tear it free. His fingers sank into its gelatinous surface, warm and slick, as if he were plunging his hands into living guts. The mass shuddered, then surged upward, wrapping around his torso like a second skin. Benjamin's screams broke into hysterical sobs as it crawled higher, covering his chest, his neck. His nails tore bloody furrows into his own skin as he tried to rip it off. His eyes bulged with terror as the thing pressed against his jaw, forcing its way over his mouth, smothering his cries into muffled gurgles. The last thing he saw before his vision went black was his own reflection in the cracked glass of a nearby tube, his body thrashing, swallowed piece by a nightmare of flesh. Then silence. Hall of Justice. The atmosphere was heavy inside the council chamber. Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, Cyborg, Green Lantern, Flash, and Shazam sat in their seats, the silence almost suffocating. Batman had just finished explaining everything about Max, and why he had attacked Lex Luthor. Diana's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp. I can't believe you, Bruce. I thought we were finally a team. Yet you're still hiding things from us. Green Lantern leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, scoffing. Yeah, spooky. A little heads up wouldn't have killed you. Maybe a hint. Something. Batman's expression didn't falter. His tone was calm, collected. I saw no reason to involve the League. At the time, it was a matter I could personally handle. Superman stood, frustration breaking through his usual restraint. Handled. His voice rose, echoing in the chamber. Bruce, we could have reasoned with him, calmed him down. We could have permanently shut down the operations at Rose Island together. Instead, you kept this from us. He stepped closer, hands braced on the table, blue eyes drilling into Batman. Where is he now? Before Batman could respond, the room dimmed. Beep. 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 The massive monitor on the wall flickered to life, bathing the chamber in red light. Warning. HIGHENERGY signature detected. A digital map of Earth appeared, zooming rapidly across oceans and continents until it locked onto a single flashing point in the middle of the sea. Rose Island. Shazam leaned forward, wide-eyed. It's him, isn't it? No one answered. The silence said enough. The screen pulsed brighter, the energy reading spiking higher and higher. End of chapter. Your most hated author has done it again. Smile with horns. Chapter 29. It has to be him, Batman replied, his gaze sharp. All right, Superman said, his voice tense. We can talk about this later. Right now, we have to stop him from committing mass murder. We'll split up. Diana, Hal, and Bruce, you're with me to Belle Rev. Shazam, Flash, and Cyborg, you head to Rose Island. Cyborg's fingers flew over his console. I've hacked their radio channel at Belle Rev. It seems he's already begun the attack there. That means the one at Rose Island has to be a clone. Then we need to move, fast, Superman said, launching into the sky. Wonder Woman following him. Green Lantern didn't waste a second. He created a solid green energy bubble around Batman, lifting him effortlessly before streaking after Superman and Diana. Shazam's eyes crackled with lightning as he floated beside Flash and Cyborg. Let's move, Cyborg said. Mercy slammed her fingers against the keyboard, frustration etched across her face. A small bump throbbed on her forehead from where she had fallen moments ago, paralyzed by Max, but she barely registered the pain. Although Mr. Luthor is out of commission, the plan will still go forward. If Pietro thinks he can just get away scot-free after what he did, he's badly mistaken. She pressed a few keys, and a loading bar crawled across the screen. Seconds later, dozens of surveillance feeds flooded her monitors. She scrolled rapidly, scanning camera after camera until she froze. One feed showed Max carving his way through armed soldiers, a scythe in one hand and a war fan in the other, moving like a whirlwind of lethal precision. His attacks were brutal, efficient, merciless. Mercy's eyes narrowed. Without hesitation, she typed rapidly, the clatter of her keyboard sharp in the quiet of the control room. Within moments, the live footage of Max's rampage was being uploaded and sent to multiple media companies across the globe. She leaned back in her chair, a grim satisfaction curling at the edge of her lips. Let the world see exactly what kind of a person Tobi really is. Meanwhile, at Belle Rev. Waller's fingers flew across the keyboard, erasing years of sensitive files, her dark dealings, classified government records, every trace of corruption she could reach. She paused when she came across a particular file, the footage of Max, the one he had demanded she erase because it revealed his true identity without the mask. Of course, she had complied, but she had kept a backup. A cold, devious thought flickered in her mind. Tonight, she would die. If that was certain, she could at least make things difficult for Pietro. Swiftly, she uploaded the footage, sending Max's rampage to the public. The building shook violently with explosions, men screamed in terror, and gunfire rattled the halls. She shut her laptop and staggered toward her cabinet as dust and debris rained from the ceiling. A portrait crashed to the floor, and she caught herself against the edge of the desk, shaking but unbroken. Opening the cabinet, she retrieved a bottle of whiskey and a glass, returning to her chair. Her eyes lingered on the bottle, a trophy of her lifelong professionalism, a gift from the president herself. She had never touched it, not a drop, until now. Pouring a full glass, she swallowed it in one long gulp, her gaze rising to the ceiling as the room trembled once more. Outside, colossal creatures surrounded the facility, tearing through vehicles and anyone foolish enough to approach. Rescue was impossible. Hope was gone. All Waller could do was wait for her inevitable end, fortified by one final act of defiance. Outside Waller's office, lights flickered, revealing walls splattered with blood and bodies strewn across the floor. Huge chunks of ice and jagged boomerangs were embedded in the walls, silent witnesses to the carnage. Sounds of someone chalking could be heard clearly. Deadshot's struggles were pitiful as Max's fingers gripped his throat, squeezing until the resistance ceased. Then, with a sharp snap, Deadshot's neck broke. His body vanished into thin air, stored away in his storage space. He stepped over the beheaded corpse of Harley Quinn, his footsteps clattering against a sea of spent bullet casings. A hand shot out and grabbed Max's ankle. He looked down to see Bronze Tiger, bloodied and battered, shaking as he clung desperately to Max's foot. Max flicked his wrist. A scythe materialized in his right hand, gleaming in the flickering light. With a single, precise swing, Bronze Tiger's head was severed. A shame, Max thought. I had been hoping to spare you. You're one of the few genuinely trying to fix this world, but you just had to make things hard. He strode toward Waller's office. With a swift kick, the door flew off its hinges. Knock knock, I'm in, Max muttered, hefting his scythe over his shoulder as he stepped inside. Waller sat calmly, sipping whiskey, her expression unreadable. Max placed his bloodied scythe on the table with a soft thud, then pulled out a glass from his storage space. He then took Waller's whiskey and poured himself a drink, raised it, and took a slow, deliberate sip. A contented sigh escaping his lips. Waller's eyes remained fixed on him, blank and calculating. Good stuff, ain't it? Max finally broke the silence, voice calm, almost casual. Well, I aim to please, Waller said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Still a bitch, I see, Max muttered, pouring himself another glass and downing it in a single gulp. He paused, noticing a small bleeding wound on his shoulder. He dug a finger in and pulled out a needle-like bullet. Seems I got careless, but seriously, poison. He murmured, glancing at Waller. As the bullet vanished into his storage space, he couldn't afford mistakes with his DNA. Why are you stalling? I thought you were here to kill me, Waller asked, her tone steady, almost curious. The fun part comes last, Max replied casually. So relax, I've got a few questions for you. What makes you think I'll answer you? She said, eyes narrowing. Humor me, Max said, clasping his hands together. Silence fell across the room as Waller stared at him, unflinching. Max relented, a faint smile curling at the corner of his lips. Defiant to the end, I see. I can respect that. I was just curious, what was the driving force behind your stupidity? Thinking you could actually create a clone capable of defeating me. He then stood up, towering over her as he picked up his scythe. To be fair though, he added, I did warn you. Waller's gaze never wavered. You know, she said quietly, even if you kill me, more like me will emerge. You are an enemy of the state. One day, you will fall. Even gods fall with the right weapon. Well said, Max replied smoothly. I'll be waiting for that day. With that, he swung the scythe in a clean, deliberate arc. Blood erupted like a fountain, and Waller's head fell to the ground. Max then paused, hearing a faint ticking sound. He tilted his head and started tracing it, then followed it to the cabinet. He opened it, and let out a low chuckle at what he found. Closing it with a quiet snap, he made a single hand sign. Far from the chaos, Superman, Green Lantern, and Batman were only moments away from arriving at Bel Rev when the night sky suddenly lit up unnaturally. A blinding sphere of light blossomed above the facility along with a mushroom-shaped cloud of fire. Shit, it's a nuke. Green Lantern shouted, eyes wide as he dove into the same energy sphere with Batman, reinforcing it with every ounce of his power. Superman and Wonder Woman braced themselves. A searing shockwave slammed into the ground, followed instantly by a towering wall of fire that roared across the landscape. Meanwhile, at Rose Island, Max clone Susano loomed over the wooden monstrosity, its massive swords pinning the creature down. Slowly, the monster's strength waned. Her chakra was nearly spent, yet the vines still writhed, moving with an almost independent life. He had only one possible explanation, the green There was no other force that could sustain them like this. He deactivated his Susanoo and stepped forward. The small wooden cocoon shuddered and cracked open. A girl crawled out, collapsing face-first onto the ground. Tiny vines lashed at Max Clone, trying to impede him, but he tore them apart effortlessly. He reached her. Her black eyes met his red ones, wide and pitiful, and for a brief moment, Max Clone's resolve wavered. Then blood spurted across the ground as his hand pierced her chest. She coughed, a strangled, shocked sound escaping her lips. Why? What had I ever done to you all? I wanted was to see the world, was that too much to hope for? She whispered, her strength fading. Max Clone's voice was low, almost sorrowful. I'm sorry, but this is for your own good, boss. He pulled his hand back, catching her body before it could collapse, and hoisted her onto his shoulder. The vines writhed beneath them, powerless now that their source had been neutralized. For a brief, silent moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, before the island's chaos raged on around them. You monster, a voice shouted. End of chapter. Intense wasn't it? Stay tuned for more. And please leave a review, it means a lot. Pleading face. 10 reviews equals bonus chapter. Chapter 30. Max Clone jumped back as Shazam crashed into the ground where he had just been, then leapt to the side as a blast from Cyborg barely missed him. He quickly activated his Susanoo, and as soon as he did, punches rained down on the armored giant from Barry, who kept zooming around in blinding speed. Max Clone grew fed up. The Susanoo raised its two blades and struck them down, creating a shockwave that blasted Barry back. Shazam jumped and caught him, then set him down before glaring at Max Clone, who was still surrounded by Susanoo. Cyborg came to Shazam's side, his mechanical eye glowing as he scanned the ruined island before locking onto Max Clone. Did you have to kill everyone? Cyborg demanded. Yes, they deserved that much for what they were doing here, Max Clone replied. How can you even say something like that? Did it ever occur to you that some of those people may have been forced into what they were doing? Flash shouted angrily at Max Clone. If you saw what I saw and felt what I felt, you would be more understanding, Max Clone replied. So what now? You are the judge, jury, and executioner. Deciding who lives and who dies. Some of those people didn't even know what they were doing, and you just killed them. There were many ways you could have handled things, and you chose the easiest way. Flash shouted. Do I look like I care? Max Clone asked, raising an eyebrow. Flash's next words caught in his throat. And what about her? Shazam said, arcs of lightning dancing around his body. What had she done to deserve what you did to her? Well, I just couldn't allow something like her to exist. There can only be one version of Max, and no cheap ripoff. Besides, I might as well have done her a huge favor and saved her from this cruel world you were so desperately trying to fix, and failing dismally at, Max Clone replied. She had her own life, goddammit. And you took that away from her. Maybe it would have been better having her around than a monster like you who kills just because he can, Flash said. Too bad. That is something that can never happen now, Max Clone said, shrugging. His eyes narrowed suddenly as he looked to the left without turning his head, spotting movement in the distance, before quickly returning his gaze to the heroes. Cyborg then stepped forward. Honestly, when Batman said you were going to kill everyone here, I almost defended you. And now I'm glad I didn't, because I would have been defending a monster. His hand transformed into a cannon, which he aimed at Max Clone, still encased in his Susanoo. Max Clone raised an eyebrow. So what now? You are going to bring me to justice. Even if I surrender now, which I would never do, it wouldn't really matter, because I am just a clone. Yes, it wouldn't, but it would be a start, Cyborg said, before firing at Max's Susanoo. At the same time, Shazam moved in a blur of speed and punched Max's Susanoo. The impact cracked the construct, threatening to shatter it, and forced it to stumble back. Max Clone quickly formed one-handed hand seals while still holding the girl's body with his other arm, before shouting. Wood release. Advent of a world of flowering trees. The ground trembled violently as Flash and Shazam abandoned their attack and regrouped with Cyborg. Huge vines burst from the earth, rushing toward them. Flash started zooming around, dodging, while Cyborg and Shazam cut the vines down. The onslaught only stopped when massive flower buds bloomed, opening up to release waves of pollen. You think this will stop us? Shazam shouted as he flew straight at Max Clone. Shazam, wait, don't breathe it in. Cyborg yelled. But it was too late. Shazam had already inhaled the pollen. His body grew dizzy, his flight faltered, and he crashed into the ground in front of Max Clone. Barry held his breath, sped forward, and grabbed Shazam before Max Clone could react. He carried him back to Cyborg's side. Max Clone raised his hand, formed another seal, and muttered. Mutually multiplying explosive tags. The ground rumbled again as multiple explosive tags erupted from beneath the battlefield. Seeing the danger, Cyborg picked up the unconscious Shazam and blasted upward into the sky, while Barry sped away just as the explosion surged closer. Max Clone stood firm inside his fully recovered Susanoo, refusing to move, as the detonations engulfed him in fire and thunder. At that same moment, a pale white Dr. Benjamin emerged from the ground like it was liquid. He staggered awkwardly toward the shore, cursing under his breath. Phew, that was close. I almost. His words were cut off when a hand shot out from the smoke and clamped tightly around his throat. He then disappeared along with the hand in a whoosh. As the dust cleared, the ruined land came into view, massive craters, broken concrete, and twisted metal everywhere. A single document, its edges burning, drifted through the air before falling into the sea. The waves quickly smothered the flames. Project X. File classification. Omega level, eyes only. Lead geneticist. Dr. Benjamin Cross. Subject designation, Thena. Specimen ID, X001. Objective. Primary aim, to create a stable genetic duplicate of subject Pietro Maximov. Attempts, 300 specimens cultivated. Result, all failed except one. Stabilization occurred only when Amazonian DNA, source, Diana Prince was introduced into the sequence. Procedure summary. Hybridization protocols combined Pietro's DNA with Amazonian markers. Out of 300 trials, 299 terminated during gestation. Specimen X001 achieved full stabilization and maturation. Abilities observed. Chlorokinesis, capacity to manipulate and accelerate plant growth at will. Regenerative adaptation, rapid tissue regeneration exceeding baseline metahuman recovery rates. Progressive enhancement, physical strength, speed, and durability increase incrementally each day. Behavioral notes. Subject demonstrates independence and accelerated cognitive growth. Retains fragments of Amazonian resilience and discipline. Conclusion. Specimen X001 is the sole success of Project X. Potentially classified as a prime hybrid. Replication attempts even with Amazonian genetic code have proven infeasible. Status. Specimen X001 terminated. End of document. Meanwhile, in Belle Rev, the last remnants of Susanoo faded around Max as he breathed hard. His clothes were burned in several places, and his mask was slightly deformed. He pulled it off, gagged, then vomited blood. His vision blurred for a moment before he closed his eyes and rubbed them. Slowly, it returned to normal. He lifted his head, staring at the apocalypse in the distance. A mushroom-shaped cloud swirled in the sky. Where the penitentiary had once stood was now a massive crater, stripped of all vegetation for 100 meters around. Wildfires burned across the surrounding forest, devouring everything within a kilometer radius. Max chuckled bitterly. Waller, you bastard, to think you'd go this far to take me down. She had kept a warhead tucked away in her arsenal, counting down. Max had spotted it just in time, teleporting out of the prison to a Thunder God marker he had placed kilometers away, just in case the heroes came for him during his massacre. Yes, he had managed to recreate the Flying Thunder God to a degree, though it still had limitations. He could only teleport within a few kilometers, couldn't spam the technique, and there was a short delay each time he activated it. It wasn't combat ready yet, but it had its uses. The moment he teleported, he had summoned his Susanoo. He hadn't fully formed it before the explosion reached him, nearly shattering the construct. But it had absorbed most of the blast, that was what mattered. And truthfully, with his new template, he might have survived anyway. Radiation was less of a threat to him now. The worst it could give him was a mild flu. Beyond that, he'd be fine. Max slammed his hand onto the ground. Sealing marks spread outward, and with a puff of smoke, he was suddenly standing atop his massive bird. Its wings flapped powerfully, carrying him into the sky. Two beams of light struck the bird, instantly dispelling it into smoke. Max plummeted. Fast, he muttered, just as a sonic boom split the air. Something slammed into him. He was driven into the ground with a deafening crash. Smoke billowed, then cleared, revealing Max pinned to the dirt. Superman's hand was clamped around his throat. Wonder Woman stood above him, sword poised at his face. Green Lantern hovered in the air, a massive construct gun leveled at his head. Max's lips curled in a smirk. Took you long enough. You've killed enough people. It ends here, Superman said. As long as I breathe, nothing is over. I was just setting an example with Waller, Max replied. Then it would be better to just end you right here, Wonder Woman said. Max chuckled bitterly. Coming from your mouth, those words actually seem believable. After all, you do kill. But when I do it, I'm labeled a murderer. Oh, how the hypocrisy runs deep. Enough, Max. Just come with us quietly and answer for your crimes, Green Lantern said firmly. Do I even have a choice in the position I'm in? Max asked, shifting slightly. The movement made Wonder Woman press her sword closer to his face. New sword. Looks sharp too, Max muttered, smirking. Too bad it ain't gonna do shit. His body suddenly twisted and splintered, turning into wood. Damn it, it was a clone. Green Lantern shouted. Superman released his grip, the wooden decoy crumbling apart in his hand. His eyes swept the battlefield, narrowing as he spotted the real Max perched calmly on a boulder, hands clasped in front of him. Max rose to his feet. His voice carried across the ruined ground, cold and steady. I knew this day would come, it was only a matter of when. Normally, I wouldn't fight you head on, especially in a place that doesn't restrict you, but I have a few things I need to test. He spread his arms slightly, eyes glinting. So here's how it'll be. I'll give you 3 minutes to try and take me down by any means necessary. But I advise you, come at me with the intent to kill. Because that's the only chance you'll have of actually succeeding. His expression hardened. Otherwise, one of you might just get killed. Because I won't be holding back, Max said as his hands turned black. End of chapter.